Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 1 Recap. 8 Biggest Moments and Reveals. Picking up after the events of Young Sheldon Season 7, Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 1 brilliantly set the scene for the third Big Bang Theory spin-off, its characters, and how the different focus helps separate first marriage story from Young Sheldon's despite many of the same characters. Acknowledging from its first scene a major difference from its predecessor with Georgie's comment about Frasier being a laughing show because of its laugh track, which Georgie and Mandy's first marriage shares, but Young Sheldon lacked. First marriage jumps in medias res by showing Mandy and Georgie's problems at the McAllisters. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Season 1. Episode 1 seamlessly shifts the focus from the Coopers and Young Sheldon to the Cooper McAllisters in First Marriage. This was obtained through Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, showing more about Mandy and Audrey's feud, and how Georgie acclimatized himself at Jim's auto repair shop, despite Georgie and Mandy had been living at the McAllisters since Young Sheldon Season 7. The episode cleverly set up Georgie and Mandy's first marriage's secondary characters, and even included indispensable cameos from Mary and Meemaw, making the switch in focus feel smoother between Young Sheldon and its spin-off. 8 Mandy and Audrey's feud continues to be the biggest threat to the piece. They are both quick to anger and hesitate to say sorry. Ever since Georgie and Mandy became pregnant with CC, it was clear how Mandy and Audrey's relationship was difficult, and their ability to turn every conversation into a fight is even more evident in the Young Sheldon spin-off. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage series premiere highlights Audrey and Mandy's antagonism, with the main action in the episode happening because of their impulsive tendencies, where Audrey implies something harsh about Georgie, and Mandy assumes the worst of what message her mother tried to send her in Young Sheldon. Coopers and McAllisters almost missed Mandy and Georgie's wedding because of how poorly they had behaved. However, Mandy's refusal to accept yet another of Audrey's digs effectively prompts her and Georgie's move to the mobile home in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 1. Saying the worst about each other and refusing to say sorry effectively puts Jim and Georgie in a difficult situation where they have to walk on eggshells, and while Georgie and Mandy are back at the McAllisters by the episode's end, Audrey and Mandy's antagonism will be sure to cause more drama. 7 Connor's weirdness reminds Georgie of Sheldon but friendlier. Their hug sets Connor up as one of Georgie's few allies. One major difference from Young Sheldon is Mandy's brother's Connor's bigger role in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 1. While Connor only makes an appearance in the episode, the moment easily establishes him as Sheldon's replacement, both in the McAllister family dynamics and in the odd way he approaches people. Although Georgie doesn't seem fazed by Connor's reaction to hug him after he reminds him their family, almost everyone among the McAllisters seems to view him as someone odd. Unlike Sheldon, who the Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon always portrayed as socially inept and annoying, Connor seems more approachable, at least in the way he interacts with Georgie. From Georgie's thanking him for the hug to the immediate connection Georgie makes between Mandy's brother and his own, Connor is likely to be a potential ally for Georgie and Mandy, besides one of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage's comic reliefs, especially in light of Mandy and Audrey's conflictual relationship. 6 Audrey and Jim's exchange about Connor sets up a major similarity with Young Sheldon. The McAllisters behave with Connor like the Coopers did with Sheldon. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 1 also highlights another similarity between the Coopers and the McAllisters. Indeed, Mary coddled Sheldon while George Sr. wanted to expose him to things Sheldon found difficult, and that was especially noticeable at the beginning of Young Sheldon. Connor's appearance at breakfast in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Episode 1 shows how similar dynamics also exist within the McAllisters. Indeed, if Jim is worried about Connor's interests, Audrey is entirely supportive of them, not seeing anything wrong with Connor. Even Mandy's reaction in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1 shows a similarity between her bond with Connor and Missy's with Sheldon and young Sheldon, as Audrey is particularly judgmental of Mandy, while seeing no faults in Connor, mirroring Mary's approach with Missy and Sheldon. Audrey's partiality toward Connor is evident in her support for his musical exploits, no matter how unusual, while she rarely awards Mandy the benefit of the doubt, instead jumping to criticize her even when Mandy tries to do the right thing and apologize. 5. Ruben and Georgie's hostilities highlight Georgie's main hurdle at the auto shop. Georgie will have to win over Ruben eventually. While Georgie's main challenge was already set out in young Sheldon to be Audrey, who never saw him as enough for Mandy, a new professional one is highlighted by Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1. Despite agreeing with Audrey's perspective to keep the peace, Jim McAllister always saw Georgie as a good kid and rooted for him and Mandy. However, having become part of the family and working at Jim's auto shop meant Georgie didn't really have to earn his place there, putting him in direct conflict with Ruben, who had worked for Jim for almost a decade. It's still early to ascribe Georgie's eventual decision to leave Jim's auto shop to create his own tire company to his not feeling welcome by Ruben, but the latter's antagonism and jealousy do not make it easy for Georgie. However, by also highlighting Ruben's wish to have a personal relationship with Jim more similar to the one Georgie has with him, Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1 sets up an interesting dynamic between Georgie and Ruben, one that can create hilarious comedic moments in the Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon spin-off. 4. First Marriage series premiere fully sets up Georgie and Jim as peacekeepers. They always try to mediate between Audrey and Mandy's short fuses. If Mandy and Audrey are the characters who often stir up arguments, Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1 establishes Georgie and Jim firmly in the role of peacekeepers. Indeed, without Georgie trying to appease Audrey, despite her hurtful comments and Jim telling her how Mandy wouldn't have budged if she didn't apologize, Mandy and Georgie would have likely stayed at the mobile home. Young Sheldon already established Jim as someone unwilling to cross his wife, but he nonetheless stands up for Georgie in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1 highlights the lengths Jim and Georgie both go to mitigate the effects of their wives' tendency to take offense personally. Indeed, Georgie is willing to take Audrey's insults if that gives him and Mandy a roof over their heads, and similarly, Jim is willing to stand up for his opinions about Georgie, to help bring back Mandy and Georgie to their house, but also to remind Audrey of another's perspective, which she never considered, as she always saw Georgie as the one who ruined Mandy's life. 3. Georgie and Jim's heart-to-heart makes George Sr.'s presence be felt despite his death. George Cooper's death doesn't stop him from being a major part of First Marriage. George Cooper's death in Young Sheldon Season 7 was handled with difficulty by the Coopers, but Season 7's finale wrapped it up in time to focus on Sheldon's move to Caltech. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage was always supposed to have a different focus and flavor from Young Sheldon, being more lighthearted because of the absence of some predetermined tragedies, but that didn't stop it from letting George Sr.'s presence felt in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1. That was particularly evident in Georgie and Jim's exchange at the auto repair shop. Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage episode 1 packed a few unexpectedly emotional moments. One of them happened right after Georgie's emphasis on how he wasn't the one needing convincing, and Jim's suggestion they had time to think of something. Georgie mentioning his missing George Sr., and how Jim sometimes reminded him of his father leads to their prolonged hug, whose gravity is undercut by Ruben walking in on them, but which still underlines how George Sr.'s importance can be highlighted even in Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage, well after his death. 2. Mary and Meemaw's visit establishes a direct connection to young Sheldon. Their bickering brings one of young Sheldon's tenets to first marriage. Mary and Meemaw's cameo is brief in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage episode 1, but it nevertheless has an impact on the show in the way it sets up a direct connection between young Sheldon and Georgie and Mandy's first marriage. By visiting Georgie and Mandy's mobile home, the two offer practical and emotional support, despite Mary wanting to offer more by inviting Georgie and Mandy to live back with her. Mary and Meemaw's snappy exchanges often offered comic relief in young Sheldon. Their appearance in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage episode 1 offers continuity from young Sheldon, but it also updates viewers on their lives after George's death, showing them return to some kind of normalcy that still sees them playfully at odds, despite the family tragedy they had recently gone through. 1. Audrey saying sorry reveals her potential for change despite her antagonism. Without her apologies, Georgie and Mandy would have never returned home. It takes some convincing on Jim's part, but Audrey eventually realizes her mistakes in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage episode 1's ending. Her apologies are hilariously covered by the passing of the train on the tracks near Mandy and Georgie's mobile home, but even just her presence there shows a shift in Audrey's outlook. Indeed, while Audrey always seems unflinching in her certainty of being in the right, she eventually subdues to get Mandy and CC to live back with her and Jim. Audrey's apologies don't seem like much in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage episode 1, but the effort she makes in going to Mandy to ask for forgiveness shows her potential for change. Indeed, while it's unlikely Audrey will be convinced soon of Georgie's good qualities, her willingness to backtrack if that meant reuniting the family shows Audrey cares about Mandy, even if she is often hurtfully critical of her. Hopefully, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage season 1 can build upon episode 1's hints and create a meaningful character development for Audrey.